Hi, we're here today with one of our most unique Arizona drag racing legends. His story is just amazing, and how he serves the racing community and his love for the racing community, and just a general great guy all around, and that's our friend Ken Bowers. Ken, I don't think any Arizona racer can think of a race event without thinking of you and Racers for Christ, but it had to come, your passion to get close to racing, and I mean, when did you first, when I know that you've served the Lord your entire life, and done it in a great way, but when did you first cross over from, there's a lot of racers that need love too, and they need, and I want to share my love of the Lord with the racers. So how did that come about? I mean, the Racers for Christ story is fantastic, but how did you get involved in
Well, there are cycles in it, in my life. First of all, I'll tell you, my wife says to me, if somebody asks me what time it is, I'm going to tell them how to build a watch. Because I like to talk, and I love people. And that's all a part of the ingredients that I believe the Lord had in mind when I was born, and the circumstances that I was raised in, and then bringing me through all the transitions of life. And here I am in Arizona, had no idea I'd ever travel to be here, and now live the greater part of my life and the greatest part of my life here in Arizona. Anyway.
What brought you to Arizona?
Church work.
Okay.
I came to Phoenix to be on the staff of what is now the Dream Center Church in 1973. But that's way ahead of the story. Let's go back to the beginning, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
I don't know who you could have in the interview that can say that they were born in the same house that their mother was born in. That's me. My grandparents were sharecroppers on Opequan Farm back in Williamsport, Maryland. The farm was pillaged after Gettysburg by the South retreating from Gettysburg to get back to Virginia. Anyway, I was born there during World War II. One of 4 boys. There's only 2 of us left now. And I was able to drive very early in life. I learned to drive a John Deere tractor because it didn't have a foot clutch, it had a hand clutch, and I could drive it when I was about 8 years old. And I was plowing corn when I was about 9 or 10 years old, probably. But anyway, we had an old 36 Ford that was handed down from family member to family member, and that's one of the cars I learned to drive on that had doors. And I also rolled it over one time out on the little field when I was chasing Eddie Collison in his car. But that was the beginning of me being involved in cars. I bought a 53 Olds when I first got a driver license, and I decided that I was going to try to hop it up. Drag racing was becoming popular, and I spent a little bit of time at Mason-Dixon Dragway in Hagerstown, Maryland. That's where I met people like Dave Strickler and Bud Fauble and all that kind of thing. Even though I love the competition, and I still do, I'm involved in it because of the people. I care about people, I really do, and it kind of fit me. So through the deciding what you're going to do with life, my dad was a pastor. He also helped do the farming, and he also worked in town. I don't know what it is to slow down, because if I remember, I'm trying to keep up with what my dad did. He just kept going, and I can remember many of the times I had bedside experiences with him when on Saturday night, he'd have so many other responsibilities, but he'd say, "Kenny, you want to go along? I need to make some hospital calls." And I'd go with my dad to the hospital, and he would let them break the rules, because then, if I remember, you couldn't go in as a visitor until you were 12 years old. But he'd take me in, and we'd visit. Anyhow, through the making a decision about what you wanted to do with your life, I went to Bible college, served a church in Dallas, Texas, went to Lodi, California on the staff of a church, and then came here in, as I said, 1973. I had gotten away from being able to go to motorsports because a lot of people in church, especially my parents, couldn't imagine that somebody that's in the ministry would want to be at a racetrack on the weekend. Mother, bless her heart, she left us in 1994, but she still couldn't imagine that I would be at the racetrack on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. If I could be there all 3 days, I would at many events. But I told her, Mother, you know what? You know why I'm at the racetrack? Because the Lord needs me at the racetrack, and that's what I want to do. Anyhow, I came to Phoenix in '73, had been away from motorsports, didn't get to go to Beeline very much because of my responsibilities at church. Then I left church staff in '78, went a few times, but then the track closed down. So along comes 1983, and I hear there's a drag strip that's being built not too far from where we live. We've lived in Tempe since '77. That's a long time, but anyway, I made my way to Firebird, and I mentioned a little bit a couple minutes ago, I have never missed an NHRA event at Firebird.
So you made your way there originally just as a spectator? And
Yes, just because I enjoyed motorsports and got to know the people, and I heard all the names and that kind of thing. Well, along about let's see, the track opened in '83, the Fall Nationals started in '88, and in 1989, if my memory's correct, a couple from Tucson got in touch with Charlie at Firebird. Charlie Allen, and I think that's how this came about. I could document it, but Charlie said, well, Ken Bowers is a minister and maybe he'd be interested in doing it. Well, I met with the couple and we did a wedding at the back of Bob Glidden's trailer up on the pit. And we're there at the back of the trailer, and I officiated the wedding and married him, and God bless him and have a great life. And a couple minutes later, Ken Owen came up to me and started talking about, Ken, didn't I know you in California? I said, yeah, you were on the staff in San Jose, and I was at Century Church in Lodi, California in '71, '2, and '3, and then came here. He said, we only have one chaplain for Racers for Christ in Arizona, and he's kind of part-time. And so he said, would you be interested? So we talked a little bit, and that opened the door.
Ken Owen was the...
He was the president of Racers for Christ.
Yeah, I remember doing a lot of national events and going places, and he was always so inspirational. He's a great person.
Ken's a great guy. And of course, one thing led to another. I got involved at the NASCAR track here also in the Valley, and I served as track chaplain there for 29 years, from 1989 until 2018.
Your passion for racing, definitely the door opens both ways in this case. You got to get into the racing, but they're open for racers to have more access. We're at the racetrack on Sunday, and many people, they are spiritual. They want to worship their Lord, and there really wasn't a process to do that or a place to do that until really the Racers for Christ at national events that I was aware of, and then they moved along to all venues are racing,
yes,
basically, and
yes.
And they created that opportunity for people to worship and race and actually be involved with family events and all that at the same time.
Yes.
What was that like in your early days when you first started?
Well, it was a challenge. I found out that not every promoter was like Charlie Allen that welcomed people at the track. I remember they sent me out to Speed World one time, and I was told that we don't have a provision for a chaplaincy ministry here or a chapel service or anything. Anyway, that has a good ending, though. Ron C. was the president he ran that track. And I remember having chapel services. He said, if you want to meet with people, you can meet over there by the trees. There were some trees behind the grandstand right there at the starting line. And I put some posters up, as is the habit of Racers for Christ. You put the posters on the porta potties. You tape them on the porta potty doors because they're going to be seen. People have, they're going to
captured audience.
Yes, you got to. Yeah. So I put some signs. We're going to have a chapel service on Sunday morning over by the trees. Well, I had a couple of those with 2 or 3 people, but that's okay. The scripture gives that as a basis where 2 or 3 are gathered. But we always have the same message. The scripture that I live by and the scripture that says, even if heaven and earth shall pass away, we know that's not going to happen. God's word is never going to be void. And I want to see how many people I can reach and touch, and I'm going to still do that. As long as I have breath, I'm going to be a positive influence. Anyway, long story short again.
There is no short story because it's a great story.
Yeah, well, anyway, we opened the door for chapel services at Speed World, and some of my colleagues continued because I couldn't possibly go to every place. And a little later on, Ron had some health issues, and I went out and called on him, and I led him in prayer to the Lord, and I did his memorial service, and that's something that I always remember, that had I not gone, what might have or might have not happened. And then I was encouraged to try to take ministry to Manzanita circle track race. I was going there in the late 80s, early 90s, and I was showed the door there that we really don't have a place for it. And as time goes on, and I patiently continued to do my thing, and when Denny Wood, who I had been friends with at PIR for many, many, many years, and Denny came back to Manzanita, and Denny said, not only do we open the door, we want you here. And that allowed us to be there every weekend. And that was a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so sad that track shut down. But as doors opened, I tried to get my toe in the door and then do what I could to be the right influence on people. And I often say, I don't pastor a church. I've been on staff of some wonderful churches, and I support what they're doing, but I have a congregation. There isn't a week that goes by that I'm not called from somebody that, they want some personal ministry. And I do more weddings and funerals than most of the pastors that I know, if I compare notes with them.
Your popularity and the awareness in the community that you built among the racers is second to none. It's just you are our racing chaplain.
Well, they're my friends.
Yeah.
I mean, and I miss a lot of them. I've made too many trips to the cemetery with people, and someday I'm going to go there. We live in a.
He's not done with you yet.
Well, I'm not done. But I'm playing in the fourth quarter. I know that.
I actually heard that last night on a rerun of Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
When the actor said his life is 4 quarters, and he's in his fourth quarter now, and that's true. I think that's part of what we're all trying to, make sure that we share our stories and our love and our passion for what we did, because none of us are going to be around forever, but we want your story to be around forever. And it's a fantastic story. The racers you've known, first name basis, whether NASCAR, NHRA,
so many.
You walk through the pits, it's like people who are with you have to be really patient because it takes you a long time to get from one end to the other.
Well, I'm honored by that. I mean, I've been on an airplane and somebody behind me will come up and they'll say, I don't know who you are, but I know your voice. And so I say, well, have you ever been to a NASCAR race at PIR? Yeah, well, I've done the invocation there. Oh, that's where I heard your voice. And so it's kind of nice to have that kind of recognition. At least it wasn't that I got into a bar fight or something.
So I have to ask you, have you ever been down the drag strip in a car?
Oh yeah, I did. I took the old 53 Olds out, and that's when they used to use shoe polish and put your numbers on your windshield and on the side. Some of you old people might remember that, where we did it. I ran my old Oldsmobile. Incidentally, my mom kind of got word that I was taking that Olds to the drag strip, and she said, what kind of influence is that? So I got the idea from seeing people beginning to put graphics on cars, and there was this product that you used to use to wash surfaces. I think it's still made, called Mr. Clean. Mm-hmm. And it had this bald-headed guy with his arms raised like that. I had a guy paint that behind the front wheels on my old Oldsmobile, and that car was Mr. Clean. And Don Garlitz painted a cross on the nose of his car as a testimony, and so that was kind of a little testimony that I could give that maybe I was trying to do things right.
The Garless stories are great as well. He definitely, lives his life for the Lord.
Yes.
And it's a wonderful story with him. There's other racers that have their different levels of spirituality and in their belief, but
Sure.
the thing is that you're there for all of them.
Yep.
And I'm sure there have been times when you've been there for when they really needed you, when the tragedy struck in their families or their family members. You were there for them, and that's a big thing, because your knowledge of the love of racing and what they went through is huge. Who's your favorite drag racer?
Oh my! Well,
you don't have to say. I try to trick you, but I don't think you can have one.
It's hard to name names because I know so many of them, and I think of those who aren't racing anymore that I care a great deal for. And if I start mentioning names, there's going to be a lot of them that I can't name. I don't want to be a name dropper. I'm proud to name drop Charlie Allen. But anyway, I have so many in all kinds of motorsports. I did a wedding at the start-finish line at PIR in November of 1991. And the couple, the groom, was a big Dale Earnhardt Sr. fan. And NASCAR put me together with this couple. They lived in Oceanside, California, and I had become the track chaplain in '89. So a couple of years later, this couple wanted to get married at the starting line, or at the track. Well, the promoters got a hold of this thing, and they said, well, let's do it just before we go live. And I had to back up my ceremony and do the very beginning of it, so that at the very time that I said to them, I now pronounce you husband and wife, NASCAR went live nationwide or wherever their audience was. And we rehearsed that on Saturday, and the groom said, boy, it would be nice if Dale Earnhardt would be here. And they said, that's not going to happen, 5 minutes before the race starts or whatever.
Right.
Somebody got to him, and not only Dale, but Teresa came. And when we were doing a little practice of it before we started the actual wedding, the groom turned to Dale and said, would you be my best man? And so he had two people standing with him. Anyway, I did that wedding, and it was live nationwide. Well, it became such a rush of requests that they had to say, we're not going to do this anymore. And I never did one at the start line.
But it was memorable.
Oh, it was great. And
so your timing was like that, was of the national anthem being sung and the jets flying overhead. You had to do it just right.
Yes, you count down to do it. Yeah. And then in November of 2000 at the race out at PIR, I was walking down pit road, and Dale was sitting on those concrete safety barriers, and he called over to me, and I walked over, and I was having a visit with him, and Gil Rabilis took a picture, and that was the last time I had seen him, because then we lost him in 2001. But that was
cherished.
Yeah, it is. I got that picture too. But in terms of drag racing, I've met so many, and I think about those that I still stay in touch with. Every now and then I'll talk to Jim Epler on the phone. Jim, he's a great guy, and of course Jim Head's a good friend, and he's a believer as well. But I'd have to tell you that the most time I've spent with, and the serendipity about getting acquainted, was with John Force. John Force is probably the best known drag racer, other than maybe Don Garlitz or Shirley Muldowney. But I've spent lots of time with John. I've spent time with him on the high heights of success, and in the times of challenge and discouragement, and those kinds of things. And he's been a true friend. And every now and then he'll give me a phone call, and we'll kind of catch up. I spent a ton of time with him. I mean, I have. He's been in my home, and I've been in his, and been to the weddings of, a couple of his kids and that kind of thing. And
he's a complicated person that's not very complicated.
Exactly.
Because it looks complicated, but he's actually a very basic person.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
He's just chasing his dream. and it'll never be totally realized. I tell him that. You know, I've said, John, what is it going to take for you to believe that you finally made it? He said, I don't think that's possible. You know, he's just...
Well, his passion's still there.
Yeah, it is.
It absolutely is still there. I've had the opportunity to be around him several times and always found him just like be fascinated, as most racers.
Yeah.
You know, it's just it's a wonderful world we live in, and the nice thing about the racing community is that as big as it is, it's really small.
Yeah.
Because we know people from all over the country,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like the industry I work in. I work in the performance aftermarket, and you know, my wife would always worry about me being on a road trip by myself, and I always explained to her, as long as I'm in a town where there's another guy from the industry, we're never alone.
You're not, right.
And that's the same thing with racers. I think
Yeah.
we've seen racers, loan somebody their tires that they're racing in the final round,
Oh.
they're racing against,
Yes.
because they need tires.
Yeah.
And James Warren did that for Garlitz, I think, one year at U.S. Nationals, and later on in life he was asked, what's your biggest regret? And he goes, loaning Garlitz those tires.
Yeah. Yeah.
But kidding, of course.
Yeah.
But that's how I think overall our sport is. I think it's very, very altruistic. People pay for it all the time. It's something that's just been it's a great thing to live, and that's not, you know, not just drag racing, and all forms of racing are that way. So Racers for Christ has celebrated a 50-year.
50th anniversary. Racers for Christ was started in 1971, and just within the last month, this book, The History of Racers for Christ, just was published. And I'm honored that I'm mentioned here in one of the chapters about some of the work that I've done and a couple of the things that I referred to. 50 years of fuel for the soul, Racers for Christ. And our headquarters is right here in Tempe, right on Baseline Road. I was on the board of RFC in the 90s, and it was during that time that the headquarters was moved from San Dimas to Chandler for quite a while, and now we are in the headquarters right in Tempe.
I wasn't aware of that. That's fantastic. Another Arizona legend. You know,
Well,
basically what, you know, it's that's great. The in the 50 years, you know, you met a lot of great people, and one of the local racers that stand on my mind that was really dedicated to the Lord, and there are many of them, and it's hard to say one, but
yeah, sure.
The story that comes to mind is Trip Shoemake.
Oh yeah, Trip was a...
You know, Trip was a guy that we, back in the 80s, we used to run Compliminator, and I'd see him at some national events in the Southwest where we go, and remember one time he was also the youth minister at North Phoenix Baptist Church, I believe.
Yes, he and Susie had a youth group there, yeah.
And he was there, and he was racing, but he felt bad because he wasn't at church, and I said, maybe this is how the Lord's calling you, is to be here, because he was a funny guy and he was tenacious, but he was a good Christian.
Yep.
And he didn't do anything to embarrass anybody.
Yep.
And the racing world's full of people like that, and we have such a short time to enjoy their presence with us here. But it has to fulfill your heart's got to be really fulfilled, because you know many people like that, and it's like it's so easy in this day and age for people to point and exclude people or be washed out, woke and washed out of things.
Right.
And I think it's more important now that people, you and your colleagues, continue to do what you do and bring people closer to the Lord, and we certainly appreciate everything that you've done. Is there, what are your, I know that over the years your thing, your gig that kept you so you could do all the other stuff, you've worked for some great car dealerships in town.
Oh, wow, yes.
And we lost one of your heroes just recently, or your from Bidoff.
Yes.
And you always tell good stories about working for that company. They must have really worked around you and worked with you and supported what you've done, your beliefs were.
I've enjoyed so much. I've been 43 years in the car business, and I've still got customers that I started in 1978, that I started selling them cars. Just this past week I sold a car to a couple that I began selling them in 78, and they've bought every car that they've had since that time.
So you're at Coulter Tempe
I'm
now?
at Coulter Tempe now, yes.
And if you want white glove service, and we don't do advertising in these things.
No, I understand. I'm not doing any
but I'm
commercials.
doing the advertising because I believe in you, and I believe that.
Thank you.
You're every time you've developed these relationships with people, because nobody likes buying a car. It's the worst. there's always the biggest out when you walk out the door. Did I get this? Did I get that? And I know how long you've been doing it, and I know the people that come back to you. You always get the great white glove treatment.
Thank you.
And,
I try to make it memorable. I try to make it enjoyable. I try to make the customer comfortable. I can tell them, I'm not going to. You're not going to be the first person I'm going to tell something that I know isn't true. And you know, I'm there to make a living. If somebody tells you they're going to sell you a car and they're not going to try to make money at it, don't believe anything else they say. So, you know, I mean,
full disclosure.
It is, you know. But, you know, more importantly is the fact that I care about people, Chris. I really do. I mean, and I've got so many wonderful, wonderful friends. I've got stories that you don't have enough. I don't know. There's no videotape, but you know, I could talk this camera till it falls over just about. But anyway,
well, you know, and all the stories are fantastic. Is there anything? You know, you've been married for how long?
54 years next month.
And your beautiful bride is stood by your side the whole time. And,
yes.
And we know that, you know, she's had some challenges.
She's got health issues. She's been suffering from multiple myeloma since 2012, and she's what I call a warrior. I just can't believe her tenacity. She's been working for 60 years. She started working for the federal government in 1971. No, I'm sorry, 61. Forgive me. It's easy to lose 10 years when you get old. But she was graduated high school in 61, went to work at Fort Lee, Virginia for the Department of Defense. And she's now been with Drug Enforcement Administration. I'm not supposed to say that, but she's been with DEA for 31 years. And she's getting near the reality that she might ought to take it a little bit easier.
But she served, you know, and she loves her passion for what she does, because she certainly could have walked away from that.
Oh, she could. And her doctor, though, tells me one of her doctors that has also been one of Charlie's doctors. Norma had a wonderful visit with her yesterday, and she said that this doctor has said to me, if Norma wants to keep working, you let her keep working, because I'm convinced that that's one of the motivating factors to keep her going.
Well,
so, anyway.
She keeps you going, and she's the one that completes you, as the movie said. But I really believe that. I think she's a wonderful lady.
Yes, she is.
We're all blessed for her being, you know, for all us people, you know, whether male or female, usually there's somebody, a spouse, that's actually fully supports what we do. And we have successes in what we do.
Yep.
And it doesn't work if you don't have somebody pulling the same side of the yoke as you are. So,
right.
It's been really a true blessing to have you here today. We hope to see you going on forever and ever and ever. Got the chance to see this last weekend. I was at a SEMA event in Las Vegas, and Ed Eskandarian was there, 100 years old.
Yep.
And we all stood up in the room, and they put cupcakes in the room with candles on it. And so at the right time, we all lifted candles up with cupcakes with the candles and sang happy birthday to him. And that man looked like he was 15 years old. He was so giddy.
Yep. And
there's a guy that just lives on, and has such a great story about the spirit of our racing and who we are. And I look at that energy in other people. I asked him, is it going to be? We do this again in 10 years? He goes, I'll do my best.
Yeah,
and I know he'll try.
Right.
But keep going after it. Keep doing what you do. You make a big difference in people's lives.
I'm going to keep trying. I try to be honest with myself and point people in the right direction. My feet are of clay. I've made mistakes. I've got, lots of challenges that you live with, but I'm grateful.
Isn't that how we learn, is by our mistakes?
Absolutely, yep. Well, the Lord is the same yesterday, today, and forever, and that's a promise that I hang on.
Well, once again, Ken, you are really an Arizona drag racing legend, an Arizona racing legend, and we appreciate every time you show up to any event we have. It's always a special day for me to see you, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today. Thank you.
It is a high honor. I said when I walked in the door, for me to say my name and legend in the same sentence is it's kind of doesn't fit. But if I can help somebody along life's way, then my living will not be in vain.
Amen.
Thank
Thank you.
you.